and welcome to today's discussion on gender-responsive disarmament and policy and practice, co-organized by the United Nations Office of Disarmament Affairs and the Permanent Mission of Sweden to the United Nations. And thanks to the Permanent Mission for hosting us today. I am Germán Vega Cortez. I am the policy specialist for protection and disarmament issues at UN Women's headquarters. And I will have the pleasure to moderate this discussion today. Let me thank all of you for being here and acknowledge both our in-person and online audiences on YouTube. We're glad to be accompanied today by member state representatives, UN entities, students, civil society organizations, and researchers. As you know, the objective of today's discussion on gender-responsive disarmament is to reflect on how to translate policy commitments on gender and disarmament into practice and explore what the gender-responsive disarmament agenda looks like in action. This will help us respond holistically to current and future security challenges. Our agenda today will start with opening remarks by the permanent representative of Sweden to the United Nations. Then we will have our panel discussion, and finally, we will open the floor for questions and remarks. Distinguished panelists in today's discussion are the Undersecretary General Izumi Nakamitsu, the United Nations High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, who leads the UN work on disarmament, non-proliferation, and arms control. She also happens to be an international gender champion and a voice for bringing a gender-responsive and human-centered approach to the work in disarmament. Second, we have Ambassador Dennis Francis, the permanent representative of Trinidad and Tobago to the United Nations. Trinidad and Tobago plays a particularly important role for gender and disarmament in multilateralism, as they sponsored, as we know, the General Assembly Resolution on Women, Disarmament, Non-Proliferation, and Arms Control that was first adopted in 2010. Let me also acknowledge our third panelist, Ray Aikson, who is unfortunately not able to join us today due to a potential COVID contact. Ray Aikson is the director of Reaching Critical Will, the disarmament program of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. They also serve on the steering committees of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, the International Network on Explosive Weapons, and Stop Killer Robots. Ray, I hope you're well. And thank you for joining us. And so let me now introduce Ambassador Anna-Karin Ennerström, the permanent representative of Sweden to the United Nations. She was previously the Director General for Political Affairs at the Swedish Ministry of Foreign Affairs and led Sweden's successful candidacy to the United Nations Security Council. She will get us started with some opening remarks. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to welcome you that are here in the room together with us and those that are on the screen to the Swedish mission. And thank you so much, Germán, for your introductory remarks and for moderating this important discussion. I'm also very happy to have my good friend, USG Izumi, here with us. And equally happy to see my dear colleague and friend, Ambassador Dennis, PR of Trinidad and Tobago. It is clear, gender equality and women's participations are determinants of peace. These are matters of rights, but also prerequisite for sustainable and legitimate peace and political processes. Yet progress towards gender equality and women's participation has been slower in disarmament fora than in other areas of diplomacy. We hope that today's meeting will allow us to explore how we can use the many tools at our disposal to bridge this implementation gap. Let me highlight some of Sweden's experiences. As you know, Sweden has a feminist foreign policy and a feminist government. It is key for us and for achieving our broader policy goals of peace, security, and sustainable development. The gender equality is fully integrated to all policy areas of Sweden's foreign and internal policy. Sweden strives to broaden perspectives, analysis, and outcomes by raising gender equality aspects within all relevant fora where disarmament and non-proliferation is discussed. One example is the Non-Proliferation Treaties review process, where we raise issues of representation and participation, but also differentiated gender impact that nuclear tests and detonations can have on women and girls, both socially and biologically. This is also one of the so-called stepping stones of the Stockholm Initiative for nuclear disarmament that was launched in June 2019 by ministers of 16 non-nuclear weapon states from different parts of the world and different security policy contexts. And some of these countries are represented around the table today. The initiative includes an ambitious yet realistic agenda for nuclear disarmament. As regards conventional weapons, there is often a clear correlation between the prevalence of illegal small arms and social violence, including sexual and gender-based violence. This correlation is even clearer in conflict and post-conflict societies, which is why Sweden continues to advocate for a strengthening of the link between the UN programs of action on small arms and light weapons and the WPS agenda. In addition, many of our financial contributions are directly aimed at promoting gender equality perspectives. For example, we continue to support organizations such as UNODA, IAEA, and WEALTH. Much responsibilities rest with us as member states. The work to achieve gender equality must start with our own practices. For gender equality and WPS to reflect it on multilateral level, member states and the UN must address the issues on an institutional level in everything from the chain of recruitment to leadership programs at national level. We also need to ensure that the voices of civil society directly inform our processes and decisions. As the UN Secretary General points out in his 2018 Agenda for Disarmament, the continued marginalization of women in these discussions is a loss for all. We echo this statement and look forward to continuing to champion women's full and equal and meaningful participation and gender responsiveness in disarmament affairs as part of our feminist foreign policy and WPS agenda. This is also something that I continue to push together with Izumi as international gender champions. Regarding our common agenda, it is important to include a gender and disarmament perspective when drafting the upcoming new agenda for peace. As I close, I want to mention that we are delighted to see that the newly launched gender policy by UNODA, as it is an important stepping stone for taking this work forward. And I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. As you very rightly pointed out, it is clear that gender equality and women's participation and leadership are determinants of peace, and so is disarmament. That is precisely why we're having this discussion here today. So without further ado, let us go on to our panel. And I will start with a question for High Representative Nakamitsu. High Representative, in your experience, what is needed to translate policy commitments on gender responsive disarmament into practice? How is your office currently ensuring that gender considerations are duly taken into account through its work? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Herman. And before I get into responding to your question, let me, of course, thank my good friend Anna Karin for hosting this, but beyond that, for our usual very strong partnership in the work that we do. And I would also like to thank Ambassador Francis for being here. As Anna Karin said, Trinidad, of course, Tobago, of course, occupies a very special place in gender and disarmament efforts. And he will talk all about that. I also want to recognize Ray. If you're watching on YouTube, she is such a strong voice in this particular topic of gender in disarmament. So I hope that you will continue pushing the agenda. We need your activism in this area, definitely. So Ray, thank you, and we miss you here today. So gender perspectives are obviously very critical for effective disarmament efforts. I think very negative direct impacts of gender inequality is really apparent in the field of weapons and this militarized or militaristic approach to security. So the first point that we really have to get across is that disarmament is a critical component of the international agenda for gender equality. And gender equality also is a critical component of security, disarmament, arms control, non-proliferation. And I think, and that's why member states have worked for many years to incorporate gender perspectives into several of disarmament treaties. Just to give you examples, of course, Arms Trade Treaty, a very apparent connection between gender and arms trade issues. And then, of course, a treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons, very specific gender provisions included. Another very important and notable example is, of course, the first committee resolution on women, disarmament, non-proliferation, and arms control. And this is spearheaded by Trinidad and Tobago, so we will learn everything from Ambassador Francis. This is a very, very important resolution because this really triggered, I would say, two things: commitment to the equal, full, and effective participation of women in disarmament, arms control, non-proliferation, and second, to address the gendered impact of weapon and violence. For example, the role of arms for elimination of gender-based violence. So, we have still a lot of work to do, but we do have a very strong foundation or basis upon which we can build our efforts. And of course, gender discourse around weapons shapes international security, which Ray Atchison would have argued very forcefully, but we can definitely, look forward to another opportunity to learn that aspect as well. Now, it's great that we are now focusing today on practical implementation. How can we actually start making some impact and commitments to make a difference? Let me just highlight 3 ways through which I see that we can collectively bring gender responsive disarmament further into action. It's all about action. My first point is that gender needs to be seen as an integral part, as I mentioned already, of our disarmament work, all dimensions of disarmament work. And it is definitely not a box ticking exercise or just going through the checklist. I think that's something that we always need to remember. Integrating gender into disarmament discussions is not also adding another additional layer of work, but rather about tackling the root causes, if you will, of power imbalance and inequality. And so as I see it, gender perspectives in the field of work is first and foremost about, doing what is right. This is the right thing to do. And bringing gender perspectives into disarmament help conceive security less as a military issue, but it's, it will place humans at the center of our security approach. And this is, frankly speaking, for the benefit of all people, which helps draw attention to issues like power dynamics, inequality, exclusion, which are obviously critical for long-term solutions. And I might point out, because I come from peacekeeping and peace building fields, all these aspects, perspectives are now fully integrated into our work in peace building efforts, for example. So in disarmament, it should be the same. The empowerment and inclusion of women and other underrepresented groups in critical decisions on our common future in all political decision-making processes. Another key point, people need to have opportunities to bring their perspectives if we are to actually come up with a more sustainable solutions together. And we also need to ensure women's equitable access to technical decision-making and expertise. And I'll come back to this point as my second broad area. And to that end, we need to invest in and involving women in a more equitable manner in all technical discussions as well. So it's not just the decision-making, but also the technical deliberations and discussions as well. So disarmament programs are, I would also argue, better. It's not just the right thing to do, but it is also a smart thing to do to involve women for all these reasons, if they are gender responsive. And our discussions are more innovative when we achieve diversity and inclusion. This innovative, more creative approaches always bring better decision-making. So it would be a smart thing to do. Now, my second point, very quickly, gender expertise and funding. I talked about, involving women in technical deliberations as well. But this would also mean that there will have to be more resources, more capacities to be made available. For example, training opportunities for younger women. I think all these things will contribute to better decision making, which of course means that adequate and predictable funding to integrate gender into disarmament processes. We also know that, there are several really good governments that really invest in these efforts, but we also know that gender equality is globally still very much underfunded. And so let's invest in this. That's my second point. The third point is synergies and partnerships. To accelerate our gender commitments in disarmament, we also need to address those agendas very holistically. And that would mean that we need collaboration at multilateral, regional, national levels. And work in close collaboration between governments, UN agencies. We now have a lot of, I would say all UN entities are very much focused on this issue. We need to work with them. Civil society, another extremely important partner in this. But I would go one step beyond, which is the public, especially younger people who take interest in security issues, also to be brought onto these gender equality and diversity issues as well. There are opportunities for connecting various gender-related and security agendas as well. UN Secretary General has called on disarmament actors to work together with women, peace and security community. And this will bring the world over, the militarized approach, bring people more at the center of a security discourse, I hope. So all this is really about building synergies with other agendas, also looking over to areas related to youth engagement, peace and security, human rights, sustainability, and others. So let's stay focused on taking, very pragmatic actions in our disarmament, but also understanding the importance of the connections with other communities. I think it's really key. So unfortunately, like many other issues, there is no one single solution. All of those efforts have to take place simultaneously and also with a sustained manner. It's not just one-off events that will change the situation, but we need to make sure that we will continue with efforts in a very sustained manner and in many different platforms, etc. The last point in my thought is that let's try to make sure that there is a broad ownership of this issue, and then we also need adaptation as well. Obviously, there is no one single size that fits all situations. All countries, all situations, they are very unique. So with understanding of the importance of this agenda, we need to be also able to adapt our approaches and make sure that there will be actual sort of impact that we will be making. I also wanted to just very briefly touch on new agenda for peace, because Anna-Karin also mentioned. As you know, our efforts in our peace, and security in the new context really is, as I mentioned, about putting people at the center of our peace and security discourse. And a new agenda for peace will be a major opportunity for us to do that. And for that reason, the Secretary General has also called these women, girls at the center of peace efforts. This will be one of the pillars of a new agenda for peace. And we are working at the moment with other entities to make sure that that will be a case. So we can accomplish this through both gender mainstreaming, peace and security issues, and by ensuring equal, full, and effective participation of women in decision-making as well. So it's the both track action meeting in the center. So very practically, what are the kinds of things pragmatically that will be really useful? Let's take the opportunity that will be ahead of us. Anna-Karin mentioned some of them, NPT review conference, one important such landmark event. Stronger gender language as part of outcome of those major opportunities. Not just in nuclear WMD field, but also in conventional weapons, etc., biological weapons, small arms, and light weapons. If we can, build and integrate stronger gender language, then we will have a further basis to work, build our work into the future. My final word, very quickly, gender policy. We're very proud of this. A lot of work got into this, thanks to Frida in my office. We are amongst the first entities, I understand, to adopt the gender policy, amongst the first of UN entities. But with this new gender policy, I am very, very happy to say that vast majority of UNODA staff really now has ownership of this. They feel that this is important, and in order for us to, and as a UN entity, as a practitioner in disarmament, in order for us to make a real sort of impact, we of course need to have the right capacities, capabilities, and of course we need to have the right work culture internally, and we are definitely tackling both of those. And with this, we would like to, as you know, we have been supporting our partners in gender analysis in disarmament and arms control. I hope that this will further strengthen. We have, for example, with the funding from the European Union, we have a very important project in the area of small arms and light weapons policies and programs. We are, enhancing our capacity to do the gender analysis. And of course, we are promoting intersectional approach to develop material and processes on how gender, age, ethnicity, and disabilities, for example, those are underrepresented and traditionally discriminated against groups actually intersect with each other, so that we will tackle multiple levels, if you will, of exclusion, because we want more inclusive disarmament discussion processes. So we are working on all these things. Some of the things that we are doing, we want to strengthen our data sets. We will be launching a new online database on gender issues, how member states are, for example, doing in their representation within the multilateral platforms in disarmament discussions. And we hope that we will gradually, but surely, making a practical change in the entire disarmament community. And that's why we wanted to have this policy launched, and we will very faithfully and vigorously implementing this gender policy. And in so doing, I'm also a member of International Gender Champion. I'm accountable to that. So watch me. If I'm not doing the right thing, then tell me. We are, of course, working with whole, UN entities, in particular UN Women. We always really enjoy working with you, you guys. You're really good people. And my final word, thank you for coming, and impressed by this gender balance panel as well. So we are making a difference. Thank you. Back to you.
Yeah, thank you, High Representative. And thank you for these very good news of the launching of UNODA's gender policy. I can tell you that from UN Women, we were very, very excited to see it implemented. We were very excited to work with you on this. And I personally work with Frida as well on this. So we're very excited for it. Those are great news. And thank you very much for highlighting what is needed for turning gender commitments within the disarmament agenda to practice. As you rightly pointed out, it is definitely vital that we place gender issues as a central part of disarmament. That gender expertise is promoted, built, and properly funded. That the practical synergies between the disarmament and the women, peace and security and the youth, peace and security agendas are further exploited. And of course, that women can equally, fully, and effectively participate and lead in shaping and implementing the disarmament agenda. And well, this last point brings me to our second panelist, Ambassador Francis of Trinidad and Tobago. Ambassador, we know that Trinidad and Tobago is sponsoring the General Assembly resolution on women, disarmament, non-proliferation, and arms control that is tabled for discussion this year. Let me give you the floor for your remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. Your Excellency Anna Karin Ernestrom, Permanent Representative of Sweden to the UN, Ms. Izumi Nakamitsu, Undersecretary and High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I welcome the opportunity to participate in this event to present Trinidad and Tobago's perspectives on gender-responsive disarmament policy to practice. At the outset, I offer my congratulations to you, Ms. Nakamitsu, and to your entire team for the finalization of the Office of Disarmament Affairs Updated Gender Policy 2021 to 2025, being launched today. This landmark achievement will certainly deepen the conversation and, more importantly, add practical value to the imperative of to the imperative of meaningfully achieving the goal of gender-responsive disarmament, bearing in mind that, as the unfolding events in Ukraine remind us daily, women and girls are disproportionately affected by war and conflict. For Trinidad and Tobago, the achievement of gender equality and the empowerment of women remain pivotal to the achievement of our National Development Strategy, Vision 2030, which is in full alignment with the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. As an adherent to the rule of law, Trinidad and Tobago views the protection and advancement of the rights of women and girls within the overall framework of human rights. Being indivisible, there can be no human rights without women's rights. We believe strongly that women and girls must be equal partners with men and must be so recognized in the nation's collective pursuit of building a strong, peaceful, cohesive, and sustainable society, while strengthening the framework of human rights protection for all. Turning such a vision into reality requires a robust, dynamic, action-oriented institutional framework, coupled with accelerated advocacy, education, and sensitization at all levels. Resolution 6569 on women, disarmament, non-proliferation, and arms control, which we introduced in the General Assembly in 2010, recognizes the invaluable contribution of women to practical disarmament measures in the prevention and reduction of armed violence and conflict, and in promoting disarmament, non-proliferation, and arms control. It challenges the international community to adopt and to institutionalize the formula of equitable representation of women in all decision-making processes related to peace and security. And as we are currently in the decade of action vis-a-vis the Sustainable Development Goals, and moreover, confronted by the fact that significant progress needs to be made to get Agenda 2030 back on track, as the Secretary General says, some searching thinking and bold action is needed to turbocharge progress to align actual performance with the aims and objectives of the resolution in order to deliver our collective ambition in SDG 5, that is gender equity by 2030. In doing so, we must confront the reality that the challenge is twofold. Namely, one, to achieve gender equity in representation, and two, to sustain and institutionalize that equity, having achieved it. For even if it were possible to arbitrarily achieve numerical equity, though not necessarily backed by appropriate training and background, that in and of itself is no guarantee of a successful outcome of such a strategy. Logic recommends, therefore, that in some circumstances, it might be both necessary and desirable for stakeholders, including the state, to undertake deliberate interventions at an early enough stage to ensure the establishment of an ever-expanding pool of talented female thinkers, policymakers, and practitioners, substantial in number, with a command of the necessary skills as a means of guaranteeing sustainability built on gender-balanced equity in the medium and long term. Such an approach would probably be broadly relevant in various contexts, but particularly in a developing country context where chronic undercapacity, including among disadvantaged or marginalized groups such as women, is an ever-present limitation on policy effectiveness across many areas, including national security. Such assault on undercapacity would amount to a strategic investment in gender equity, gender mainstreaming of public policy, and in building a future of sustainable peace and security, secured and driven by women as equal partners in all stages of evolution. In Trinidad and Tobago's limited experience, the gap between policy and practice is progressively being narrowed, as evidenced by the ascendancy of women alongside their male counterparts in the most senior ranks of the various branches of the national security apparatus. Even so, much more remains to be done. Chair, permit me to use this platform to underscore Trinidad and Tobago's deep gratitude for the assistance and support given to us with generosity and commitment by the various UN agencies and bodies, especially UN Women, UNODA itself, and UN LIREC in gender mainstreaming initiatives and in making available practical lessons and advice on the mechanisms by which women have contributed and can continue to contribute in the maintenance of peace and harmony in our societies. Be advised that Trinidad and Tobago's commitment to secure the involvement of women as equal partners alongside men in matters related to peace and security at all levels of the decision-making processes remains undiminished and undiluted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. These are very engaging remarks. And I think I can speak for all of us here when I say that the commitment and leadership of Trinidad and Tobago in promoting women's meaningful participation and leadership in all affairs regarding disarmament and peace and security is highly appreciated. Thank you very much. And well, we were supposed to go on array, but unfortunately, as they cannot be here with us today, we are going to go on to the next section of our event today, which is remarks and questions from the floor. And so please, if you have any comments or questions, please put your sign like this. Thank you very much. And but I have here on my list that Ms. Amelie Numeroy, Program Manager at the International Action Network on Small Arms, INSA, had already requested the floor. So please, Ms. Amelie Numeroy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to be here today, back in person for the first time since the beginning of the pandemic. My name is Amélie Nameroy. I am the Program Officer for the International Action Network on Small Arms, INSA, a membership-based organization supporting efforts to make people safer by reducing demand for small arms and light weapons, improving firearms regulation, and strengthening controls on arms transfers. INSA is also the official coordinator for civil society participation in the United Nations processing on small arms. I would like to thank the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs, FRIDA, and the Permanent Mission of Sweden to the United Nations for their kind invitation to this event on gender-responsive disarmament in policy and practice. The United Nations resolution adopted by the General Assembly in December 2021 on the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons in all its aspects, Resolution 76-32, underscores the importance of adopting a gender-responsive approach to small arms control. The recognition of the gender dimensions of the use of small arms and light weapons has also progressed thanks to recommendations contained in the consensus outcome documents of the Third Review Conference, the 6th and 7th biennial meetings of states, and the final reports of the 5th Conference of States Parties to the Arms Trade Treaty. It is also complemented by the decisions of other bodies, including the United Nations Security Council, the United Nations General Assembly, and the Human Rights Council. Gender is often presumed to relate primarily to women and girls and fails to take into account the full spectrum of gender, including non-binary people of diverse sexual orientations, gender identities, and expressions. The gendered impact of small arms proliferation and misuse on women and girls, such as to commit sexual violence or slavery, may also have an impact on LGBTQI+ people, as well as boys and men. For example, men and boys account for the vast majority of violent deaths, including homicides and armed conflict, often because of enforced recruitment and targeting by soldiers, police, armed groups, or criminal gangs, simply on the basis of their gender. Likewise, security forces or criminal gangs commit extrajudicial executions of transgender people or gay men or sex workers because they do not conform to the predominant gender roles in society. As such, it should be noted
that while the emphasis of gender mainstreaming in small arms controls and disarmament must aim to achieve women's full and effective participation, gender equality, and gender parity, gender mainstreaming must also include the analysis of gender relations, differences, and inequality. This should include the collection of age and sex, disaggregated data, and research on effective measures to prevent gender-based violence. Developing gender mainstream policies requires a broader approach that cannot solely focus on numbers. I thank you.
Thank you very much. And forgive me for having blatantly mispronounced your name, Ms. Namura, right?
Thank you.
And thank you for bringing that very important aspect of the intersectionality that we need to take into account in disarmament efforts. It is very, very important. And with that, I go on to the next person on my list here, which is who is Mr. Anthony Hinton from the Permanent Mission of Canada to the UN. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Herman. Thank you to your team, Frida, and to our hosts as well, excellencies and members of the panel this morning. It's fantastic to be here with you all and to participate in the discussion today, certainly as a member state that strongly supports the objectives that have been described already this morning. And I think Ambassador Anastrom, from her perspective, could have been reading my government's, policy position on all of these issues. We share so many similarities as partners, countries with feminist foreign policies, feminist international assistance policies, feminist governments, and a gender-balanced cabinet as well in our case, and a country that's made a commitment to apply a gender-based analysis plus to its policies and programming, including in the field of non-proliferation, arms control, and disarmament. So basically, I don't have much to add to what you've already said from your side. And similar to the work of ODA on its gender policy, our mission has also put in place a gender pledge in which we set out our contributions and our expectations of all of the mission staff from the permanent representative on down in all of our work here in New York from an intergovernmental perspective. We'd also like to, I think, highlight that from our perspective as well, the WPS agenda applies fully and completely to the work we undertake in non-proliferation, arms control, and disarmament, and vice versa as well. And that's kind of critical, I think, to Canada's vision in this area. I'll speak briefly to a couple of objectives of ours and then some practical measures, and then we can move right along because I know there will be many more colleagues wishing to intervene today. From Canada's perspective, we wish to ensure a diverse and meaningful participation in these areas, and we need to start by setting an example. So we're committing to fielding gender-balanced delegations to all large, conferences and intergovernmental meetings. When you only send one delegate to one meeting like today, it's hard to do a gender balance. So you have a man today here with you, but c'est la vie. And from our perspective, it's important that delegations have a gender balanced character to them, as well as women in leadership roles, particularly so that younger women see themselves in the work that we do together from an intergovernmental perspective. And I think it's great to see that we have a woman PR hosting us today, and woman High Representative head of ODA as well in that perspective. I think it's not just about having women in the room, of course, but rather taking a feminist approach to disarmament work, understanding how weapons affect different people differently is essential if we want to find solutions that work for everyone. Again, intersectionality is key to that. It's not just a question of gender, as Emily described. Practically, for Canada, we make several kind of contributions in this area. We work with some other partner countries to fund women in cyber security fellowship. And so that's something we do with Australia and Netherlands, UK, US, and New Zealand. We provide some extra budgetary funding to UNODA's gender and disarmament programs of several $100,000 over several years in various conventional weapons and ammunition. Canada is also championing a number of action items in the Secretary General's agenda for disarmament, including the full and equal participation of women in decision-making processes, number 36. And then lastly, I'll just say that for the first committee work in the past session, most recent past session, 76 fall main session, as well as going forward, it's our commitment to only co-sponsor resolutions in the first committee that include gender language and gender considerations. And that's kind of a new development for Canada, and it's going to put us off of our historic positioning in some cases, but it's also opened the door to additional opportunities for our advocacy to include gender issues in kind of the suite of perennial and annual and biennial first committee resolutions. I think that is hopefully seen as to be fully in line with the trajectory and the goal originally set by Trinidad and Tobago. That's all from me. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much for those remarks. It is great to hear that Canada is taking concrete steps and to basically be in line with this discussion, taking policy commitments to practice. And let me pick on what you said on gender balance. As you said, gender balance delegations, as it was said before, having equal participation of women and men in disarmament discussions is not only the right thing to do, but also the smart thing to do. So thank you very much for those remarks. I have here a couple of questions for the panel. I'm going to give the floor to Mr. Shivanand Sivamohan. I hope that's the way he pronounced it. I'm sorry. From the Permanent Mission of Malaysia to the United Nations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Let me first join everyone else here in thanking the Permanent Mission of Sweden and the UNODA, as well as the distinguished PR of Trinidad and Tobago. I think it's a great opportunity for us, and we're delighted to be here. As to my question, I would like to ask the High Representative, as an exemplar of the leadership of women in multilateral disarmament fora, can you tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that you have encountered in your own career and in encouraging other women to pursue similar professional paths? Also, building on the point raised by Ambassador Francis earlier on the need not just to achieve numerical equity, but also to build a sufficient talent pool to ensure sustainability in the long term. Perhaps some of the work that UNODA is conducting, especially with regard to developing countries. Thank you.
Please.
No, thank you. Thank you for these really important questions. The first one, I'm not sure if I'm a good example, but yes, I have always worked basically in peace and security field. And I can tell you, when I started my UN career, which is more than 30 years ago now, I mean, things were very different in the UN. I started in the field, and I started in a sort of conflict zones. I mean, the Ukrainian conflict is very difficult, painful for me, because it brings me back to those really horrific scenes that I saw and experienced also in Bosnia and the former Yugoslavia. And I was the first women international staff to be deployed in Sarajevo in the active sort of conflict zone. And during those times, because we were so few, things were just so different. I mean, first of all, people didn't understand why I was at the time with UNHCR, why UNHCR had to send a woman to the field. So, we really had to build from scratch why this is important. Half of the sort of beneficiaries, the recipients of our service, from the UN is women. So, we felt that, there's nothing strange about women going to these conflict zones. But I mean, we had to really explain why this is important. So there were practical difficulties, of course. I mean, there were no, toilets for women, female staff, and I mean, all sorts of things. But my approach has always been to make a very rational, logical arguments why this is important, rather than emotional. And I think essentially that's what we are doing. It's a right thing to do. It's also a smart thing to do. And the second, which perhaps didn't really come across in my talks today, I think it's really important to build alliances with people like yourselves, men who really understand why this is important. We have this He for She initiative as well. I think it's really key to make sure that this is not issue for women, but this is for everyone. Everyone will benefit from the work that we do. And therefore, we need to have everyone involved in. So building alliances with those who understand and who, understand the importance of it. And, making sure that, they will work with you. So, I mean, my efforts have always been about building alliances and partnerships with men and women, of course. So, I mean, that's what I would give as an advice to women who want to go into the security field, disarmament, which still is unfortunately male-dominated. And perhaps I think also especially for younger women, I mean, I think women in general, they have to sort of combat a sort of a stereotype. This is really not for women. I hope that they would not fall into the trap of that. That is a myth. I think this is a field equally for men and women. So if you are interested, then seek out opportunities to learn, and don't get sort of, countered by those really, at times, very technical discussions about weapon systems, etc. Engage and learn, and don't build up a sort of a psychological barrier, but get involved in those discussions. And there is nothing shameful about, arguing for putting human beings at the center of security discourse. It's not an emotional discussions. It actually makes sense. So, bring those overly militaristic at times discussions, overly technical discussions at times, and then put a human face, human touch to it. And I think, if more women can be involved in those discussions, they will be making enormous contributions to the better. So I think it's that will be my advice. And what can we do? I think we should really work with, I mean, in your area, we have a regional office in Kathmandu, and we are really focused on capacity building. And, disarmament actually is a really wide area. It's from nuclear and other weapons of mass destruction to, new issues like cybersecurity. I mean, someone who did not come from a disarmament specific field. I mean, the past 5 years, every day is a learning day. So, we should really invest. What we really should be doing together with you is to invest in creating more talents, capacities, and technical knowledge, and we would definitely like to do that, and we would like to invest in those efforts as well.
Please, Ambassador.
Can I just, because I unfortunately need to leave, I have a minister here and I need to attend to a meeting where she is. But I just wanted first to say thank you very much to all of you, and I hope you will continue a good discussion. And secondly, to also add to what Izumi said about the the importance of women. I think, I mean, I totally agree with it. It's not the best way to do it, it's a smart way to do, but I think it's also the only way because we really need to involve 50% of the world's population, and we cannot simply not afford not doing this. It's a matter of security, but it's also a matter of economy. And the last thing I wanted to say is that behind you here, you have Agda Russell. Agda Russell was the first ever female UN ambassador. She left in 1962, and between 1962 and 2020, when I came, there were no female Swedish UN ambassadors. So with that, I will say that it actually, even for a country like my country, who is very strong in gender equality and has a feminist foreign policy, these processes take time. So we all have to be patient and continue to work. So thank you so much. It's been great being part of this meeting, and I wish you all the best, and to Izumi and Dennis and Shaman. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank
And
you.
I'm sorry that I have to leave.
No, I know.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you very much, High Representative, for your perspective, especially as you sharing from your personal experience. I think one thing we can take from this is that we've come a long way, but there's a long way to go. And well, thank you for continue leading this process. Thank you very much. So I go on to Flor de Lis Vasquez from the Permanent Mission of Mexico to the United Nations. I think you have a question to ask the panel. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Herman. First of all, thank you to the Mission of Sweden. Ambassador just left, but Anna is here. And of course, thank you so much for the High Representative Ambassador Francis and from IANSA. Great to be here. This was a very rich discussion in one of our top priorities for Mexico, actually two of our top priorities together, because we launched also a feminist foreign policy last year. Mexico has been working, and this is actually not new. We hold the first international conference on women 45 years ago, more 47 now, but and we've been working. I mean, you know better maybe than others on disarmament for many years as well. So bringing together these topics is so important for us. And we are currently at the Security Council, and we are actually co-chairing with Ireland, in fact, the informal expert group on women, peace and security. And this is important because disarmament is an important part also of the agenda. The WPS agenda is before all human rights agenda as well. Is the right for women to full, equal, and meaningful participate in decision making regarding peace processes and negotiations in across the board. So we really think this DDR is an important part, of course, of the agenda, and we should maybe address it in a more broadly way. It hasn't been there that much in our discussions as other dimensions of the agenda have been there, but this is also maybe a good reminder that we should do much more to also maybe strengthen synergies with other organs and other agendas, and bring more this approach to our discussions in the IAG. I also wanted to share with you that last year we hosted the Generation Equality Forum as the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. And one of the action coalitions that was launched was the WPS and Humanitarian Action. And that is important because we realize we have built a huge normative framework on WPS but there is a huge gap between the framework and the implementation of the agenda. So actually, some of our allies are here in this table. Some of you have joined the forum, and I think I don't know if you know that actually is part of the coalition, but I think it should be because we are all working for this same purpose. We need to bring more women, and we need to ensure more their full, equal, and meaningful participation in all decision makings regarding international and international peace and security. So that was one of the things I wanted to share with you. We are working in many different ways for disarmament and for gender equality, but those should be definitely much more strengthened, working together. We are definitely aware that there is a lack of women and gender parity in the disarmament fora. That's a thing that we need to build more capacities, and as you said, bring more young women, and specifically maybe bring more women from marginalized groups, and from those groups that their voices that are not necessarily heard in our discussions. So the intersectionality approach, I think it's very important, and I'm grateful you touched on that, because that's one thing also we bring to the gender equality discussions. So I have one question, because besides the lack of representation that we were just talking, and the meaningful participation of women in the disarmament fora, there is another concern. Despite the growing attention to the need to consider gender analysis and disaggregated data in research pertaining the impact of conventional weapons and small arms, and as well as on the relation between availability of these weapons and conflict, we feel that there has not been enough awareness on the impact of weapons of mass destruction on women and girls, and the gender dimension of the impact of these weapons. So until very recently, maybe. So we would like to ask about the possible immediate actions to take in coordination with the UN system, and to make this issue more visible, and to try to highlight as well the need to mainstream gender issues across all the multilateral action on chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons. That we are requesting. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you. The link with women, peace, and security issue, I mean, I fully agree with you. I mean, so thank you for that comment. And on the question part, on the weapons of mass destruction, you're right. NPT doesn't have a direct reference to gender issues in its original iteration, but subsequently there were whatever it's called, decisions or documents that was put together by the chair, but also endorsed by the states parties, have gender issues. And we do have, the states parties do have this opportunity coming up in August. So I'm very much hoping that there will be a stronger gender reference at the time of the review conference of the non-proliferation treaty, because as I said, a stronger gender reference will build stronger basis and foundation upon which states parties can further increase their efforts on gender dimensions. Now, we do have this new treaty, the Prohibition Treaty, which has actually quite a lot of gender inputs. I mean, for one thing, I mean, of course, the participation side, but also it's very strong on gender impact. It really rightly recognized the different impact of nuclear weapons radiation on women and girls. And I think, TPNW has many different new sort of dimensions, but I think this gender reference is one of those, demonstrative outcome of this new treaty that really puts gender issues at the center of weapons of mass destruction, in particular nuclear debate. So, we are following very carefully, very closely, very carefully how this will further develop in that particular treaty framework. As you know, you're a center of that. There has been quite a lot of discussions led by Ambassador Clement, the president-designate, to prepare for the first meeting of states parties of the TPNW. So we're very keenly interested how those TPNW states parties can further develop gender impact discussions in that context. And we will also have opportunities in the BWC, Biological Weapons Convention. I mean, clearly, that's a good opportunity also to look at the gender impact. So my strong recommendation is to make sure that states parties will take advantage of those milestone major opportunities to further enhance the gender discussions in arms control and disarmament. And that includes definitely the weapons of mass destruction part as well.
Thank you very much, High Representative. It's great to hear that there's a lot coming on the issue of gender and disarmament. It seems like you're going to be very busy. And thank you very much, for Denise, for your remarks as well. Let me congratulate Mexico for their feminist foreign policy. As a Latin American myself, I hope that this practice expands all over. And thank you for highlighting that point on the overlapping issue of the Women, Peace and Security agenda and the disarmament agenda, which is DDR. I think that particular issue is a very clear example of what is needed to have gender responsiveness in disarmament, in this case, DDR efforts. If I may quote an example, we recall Colombian experience, for instance, where the DDR process in the peace agreement is gender responsive only because from the start women were able to fully and equally and meaningfully participate at the table, and that is a lesson learned. So thank you very much for highlighting that point, very important. Participants here in person, may I ask you, does anyone have any other questions to the panel? Please go ahead. Oh, sorry, I don't see your.
Sorry.
Yes, please, Argentina.
Thank you very much, Herman. First and foremost, thanks to the mission of Sweden for this invitation to participate in these panel discussions. And thanks to BSC Nakamitsu and to Ambassador for the remarks and presentations. I have a brief comment and a question related to that. As you may know, and it was addressed during this event, the negative impacts on our society of cultural stereotypes is perhaps more evident in the field of weapons, war, and militarism. As a consequence, much of the discussion on disarmament perpetuates the highly problematic gender constructions of men who are violent and powerful and women that are vulnerable and need to be protected. Gender perspective in disarmament, peace, and security must be about exposing and challenging this state of affairs on one hand, and to promote an equal and meaningful participation of women in the disarmament agenda on the other hand. So on this issue, my question for the panelists would be, how can we promote a meaningful participation of women in the disarmament agenda and at the same time break down the cultural stereotypes that participation in these issues are for men? So how can we work on both tracks and how UN can help us in this regard? Thank you very much.
If I may, let's, just because we're a little pressed of time, if I can go on to, maybe you could keep it to remarks, please, Representative Indonesia and Australia, and maybe later we can have your questions in writing. We can provide answers after. Please go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to join in also others for thanking the Permanent Mission of Sweden for hosting this event, and also thanking the panelists for the very insightful presentation. First of all, in this opportunity, I would like also to reaffirm Indonesia's commitment for the implementation of 1325 in supporting full, equal, and meaningful participation of women in peace and security. And our relentless support has been also transpired through our various initiatives, among others by establishing the networks in Southeast Asia Women Peace Negotiators and Mediators, as well as Afghanistan Indonesia Women Network. And also, if we could recall, also in 2020, Indonesia also initiated the first ever UN Security Council resolution on women peacekeepers that calls for a full, equal, and meaningful participation of women in peacekeeping. For us, it's very important to amplify the voice of women in all peace and security agendas, including on disarmament. And also we recognize that there are plenty of work that still needs to be done to increase participation of women in disarmament. It is really indeed encouraging for us to see that some of the provisions in the TPNW recognize the importance of effective participation of women in nuclear disarmament, and also acknowledge the disproportionate impact of nuclear weapons on women and girls. And if I may, can I ask the question now, or should I submit the questions later?
Maybe, I think just since we are a little bit present, you could just submit the question in writing.
Okay, so
I'm sorry.
no problem. I have some questions for the panelists, but of course, due to the time restriction, I will submit it through the secretariat, and I thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm sorry, I forgot to thank Argentina for their question. We're just gonna go to Australia before, and then we'll go on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to our hosts at the Swedish Mission and excellencies and panel members. This is a great opportunity for dialogue on these important issues, and it's great to hear the cross-regional support in the room on the importance of gender issues in disarmament. I'd like to also commend UNODA for your gender policy, which is a landmark document and something we very much welcome and support. Gender issues are a major foreign policy priority for Australia, and we see this play out across the spectrum, from our development assistance to, I guess, hard security issues like disarmament. Trying to, as you so well put a human face on it and keep a people-centered approach. I think a lot of our work in the security space has focused on representation issues, in improving gender parity on delegations, working on building a pipeline of talent, such as through the Women in Cyber initiative that we support very strongly. That's been very important. I think there's more we can and should be doing on the evidence around why this is important. We agree with you that this is the right thing to do, but it's the smart thing to do. But there are some who need more convincing, and evidence is very helpful in that regard. We've seen from our own experience that data is really key to, first of all, illustrating the problem, and then finding a meaningful and step-by-step way of addressing it. So I think there is more we can do to look at that data on how on how weapons affect different people differently, as Canada so well put it. And we would be interested in further dialogue with UNODA on where those data gaps are, what we can do to support further research in that area that highlights where the problems are and what we can do to meaningfully address it in a data-driven way. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Representative of Indonesia. Thank you, Representative of Argentina. If you don't mind, I think in the interest of time, if your question as well, we'll take note and we'll provide an answer in writing. Thank you very much. So just to wrap this in discussion, let me thank our distinguished panelists and all of you who have taken the floor here today in discussing this extremely important issue of gender responsive disarmament. It has been definitely a very, very interesting discussion. And having listened to you today, I think one of the key takeaways from this discussion is that the disarmament and other agendas, like the Women, Peace and Security, the Youth, Peace and Security agenda, are deeply complementary. In the end, the ultimate goal of these agendas is to contribute to building and sustaining peace, durable peace. And therefore, identifying and exploiting those interlinkages between these agendas is crucial to their effectiveness. As it has been highlighted today, there have been several advances in this direction. The Arms Trade Treaty, for instance, which was strongly advocated for by feminist movements around the world, is one of the clearest examples of this. For instance, through its Article 7.4, which made it illegal to transfer weapons where there was a risk that those would be used to commit or facilitate gender-based violence. That is gender responsiveness right there. It not only advances disarmament objectives, but also advances the protection and prevention pillars of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. And the first committee resolution on women disarmament, non-proliferation, and arms control, spearheaded by Trinidad and Tobago in 2010, is another notable example. Most importantly, this resolution advanced the argument for the equal, full, and effective participation of women in disarmament, arms control, and non-proliferation, which is also one of the key elements of the Women, Peace, and Security agenda. This is why efforts such as the implementation of the gender policy of UNODA, announced today by High Representative Nakamitsu, are so important. Because advancing Women, Peace, and Security agenda within and along disarmament efforts, it's not only the right thing to do, it is definitely, above all things, the smart thing to do. If we are to effectively advance not only on global disarmament, but on its ultimate goal of achieving durable peace and security as a whole, it is particularly important to understand that, one, ensuring gender responsiveness in all efforts is key. And second, that women's participation matters, but leadership for women to enter those circles of power in disarmament and decision-making instances in general is absolutely crucial. And so, as it has been highlighted today by our panelists and other participants in this discussion, the way forward to effectively advance the disarmament agenda is to do so inclusively and equitably, to make sure that women, as much as men, can lead in critical decisions on our common future and in all decision-making processes. And this is, to me, a key takeaway. And well, with this thought, I again thank the permanent mission of Sweden and UNODA for having co-organize this event. And of course, thanks to our distinguished panelists and our participants in person, as well as our online audience for joining us in this very interesting and enlightening discussion. I hope you will have a good afternoon, good evening, good morning, good night, wherever you are. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.